In sections of our Fox River, dozens of species of freshwater mussels have all but disappeared. The offender has escaped detection for decades. Today, we intend to identify and, with your help, find and indict the assassin in this egregious crime. We will call this case the case of the missing poison. My name is Art Malm, and I am your host for this episode. Welcome to aqCSI, Fox River Valley. The crime? The unexplained death and disappearance of our central Fox River Valley's mussels. For one, Uncle Spike the mussel is missing, and it's our job to investigate. Mussels don't get much love. They hide themselves in the sand and gravel, cleaning the river and its bottom. As we see in this time-lapse video, mussels have an awesome capacity to clean. Think of the mussels in our Fox as the little Roombas of the river bottom. Except they don't get around very well. That's Glute. Glute and his buddy QB will be hanging with us today. We have the crime and we know the victims. The venue, rivers of the United States. Similar unexplained losses of freshwater mussels since the end of the 20th century has been a problem seen throughout America. Let's meet the family, the Unionid mussels. Freshwater mussels native to our Fox have a fascinating breeding routine. Mama mussel uses lures to trick fish to carrying her babies on their gills. The host fish nurtures those tiny baby mussels, the glochidia, through adolescence to maturity. At that time, the tiny young mussels, now fully formed little adults, let go of the host and drop to the river bottom. Kind of like young adults fresh out of high school, getting off the graduation bus. At one time, mussels of our Fox had real economic value, beyond the fact they are free and very effective river cleaners. Let's go back in history to the fashion industry at the start of the 20th century. The Fox River was home to a mussel population so large it supported a freshwater pearl industry. Fox River mussel shells were valued for button making on an industrial scale. Glute, get out of the buttons. He's so weird. Since that time, mussel populations have crashed. Here's the mystery. If we look at mussel studies done in 1957, the blue bars, we see most places along the river had a dozen or so species. Except the central Fox River Valley, between Algonquin and Yorkville, where mussel populations had crashed. The 1999 survey, the bars in red, found no mussels at all in South Elgin, and at St. Charles, there was only a single remaining species. There were major losses seen everywhere over those 40 years, but the central Fox River Valley was a kill zone. A closer look at mussel species counts between Geneva and Aurora found major species losses between 1969 and 2003. In 2003, no live mussels were found in any of the 4 dam impoundments, Geneva, Batavia, North Aurora, or Aurora, on this section of the river. Finally, mussel studies done in 2009 from McHenry, Illinois at River Mile 98 to Weedron at River Mile 9 once again found no mussels at all at the 2 central Fox River Valley sites in South Elgin and Geneva. This is a mussel kill zone. Where did these mussels go and why are they missing? One problem we know of is mussels have limited mobility and need oxygenated water to survive. In the backwater pools behind our dams, there are problems, where oxygen starvation of the natural riverbed beneath suffocating sediments has killed important organisms in the river's aquatic ecosystem. A little bit of sediment might not be great habitat, but okay for larger mussels. But for those little tiny baby adult mussels, fresh off their adolescent guilt trip, maybe not so good. If the habitat is right, where the tiny mussels drop off their bass buses, they may survive and reproduce. In our Fox River, that has been a big if. Too much benthic sediment and the habitat is no longer livable. So what's wrong in this free-flowing section of our river near South Elgin, where no live mussels have been found for years, or this section near Geneva? There's been a long history leading to the disappearance of Spike and his clan. That's QB, he's Glute's buddy. Let's look at mussel populations through history's lens. The history of our dams, water pollution, and water pollution control on the Fox. Nothing quantitative, just circumstantial. A history you need to be aware of, though. This is aqCSI, Fox River Valley. We'll call the year 1800 times 0. The Potawatomi Indians live on the west bank of the Fox, and a few early settlers have arrived from the east. Finest fishing in the land. Everybody happy as clams. Around 1840, the Industrial Revolution hits the valley. Dams are built up and down the river for water power. Mussel populations probably start faltering because of habitat loss. In 1880, the Fox River Valley is growing and our Fox becomes a common sewer. Sewage and other oxygen-demanding organic wastes begin to pollute and kill unknown numbers of mussels through asphyxiation and ammonia poisoning. By 1900, pearl and shell harvesting were part of the Fox River Valley economy. Overharvest likely accelerated mussel population losses. But by the 1930s, the invention of plastic left the Fox shell button industry dead in the water, and the mussel harvest was over. Sewage treatment was becoming commonplace and increasingly effective at removing BOD, oxygen-demanding organic wastes. But ammonia pollution continued to get steadily worse as more people moved into the Fox River Valley. By 2000, improvements in wastewater treatment had eliminated BOD as an issue, and significantly less ammonia was being discharged. But mussel populations continued to crash. Researchers were trying to understand why. By 2010, significant ammonia discharges were a thing of the past, and it was clear there was some reason other than habitat loss for the continuing mussel decline. Here is the mystery in a nutshell. By the 1980s, fish populations were responding well to our pollution control efforts and improved water quality. Yet Spike's family continued to be devastated. Spike's kids, his grandkids, cousins, nieces, nephews. What was happening to Spike and the others? Disease is always a suspect, but if disease was the culprit, we would expect the disease to have spread up into the Fox's tributaries. But that hasn't been the case. The worst of the problem is in the main stem of the central Fox River Valley. How is this segment different from the northern and southern thirds of the watershed? Population density. The central third is by far the most densely populated section, with a long history of sewage treatment. Okay, aquatic gumshoes, let's summarize what we know. A gumshoe is an old-time movie term for a detective. You're welcome. Mussels are great cleaners of the river and its bottom. The latest surveys through 2010 tell us at least 6 locations where no mussels remain at all. Our Fox's fishery has responded well to water pollution control efforts and water quality improvements, but its mussels have not. Mussel habitat destruction by dams and river siltation remains, but mussels are missing from free-flowing areas with good habitat. There is no evidence of systemic mussel disease in river tributaries, and the highest mussel population losses are in the central Fox River Valley, where human population density has increased tenfold over the last 100 years. QB, get us the chloramine hypothesis. With that and a little chemistry, we will be ready to indict our suspect. This is aqCSI, Fox River Valley. Chloramine has been responsible for unexplained mussel poisoning like that seen in our Fox River since chlorine was first used for sewage disinfection early in the 20th century. When you add chlorine to water that contains ammonia, like sewage, the two react instantly to form chloramine. Chloramine is widely known and used as a disinfectant in many public water supplies. It's safe, effective, and it keeps water mains disinfected much longer than chlorine. So if chloramine is such a widely known chemical, it surely has been cleared of suspicion as a mussel poison, right? Did I mention chloramine is used to kill zebra and quagga mussels? Zebras and quaggas aren't exactly like Spike. For example, neither take an adolescent guilt trip ride, like Spike and his family. But what do we know about chloramine toxicity to mussels like Spike? It turns out next to nothing. Mistaken identity appears to be at the core of this mystery, And that's important because of the confusion this has caused investigators. Assassins don't like to use their real names, and chloramine is hidden behind a lot of aliases over the years. Chloramine has always been referred to as some type of chlorine. Total chlorine, combined chlorine, chlorine residuals. That's just a few. Chloramine has been measured and reported as chlorine since chlorine's first use at sewage treatment plants over 100 years ago. If you listen carefully, I'll be making that same very mistake in a couple of minutes. Find the error and receive extra credit. And if you'd like to find chloramine toxicity research on freshwater mussels, good luck. You can find tons of studies on chlorine toxicity and tons of studies about the toxicity of ammonia. But other than chloramine's use killing the invasive zebra and quagga mussels, interesting but not the same, I've found only a single study on chloramine toxicity to freshwater mussels. Stephanie Goudreau's The Effects of Wastewater Treatment Plant Effluents on Freshwater Mollusks gives us the LC50 for Spike's cousin, Velosa iris, the rainbow mussel, also missing from our fox, and it's bad. The LC50 is the concentration of a poison found to kill 50% of the population tested. The chloramine LC50 for the babies, the glow kids, of Spike's cousin's rainbow is 0.084 milligrams per liter. In this context, a small number is very big, telling us chloramine can be 10 times more toxic to mussels than ammonia. QB, pay attention, this is important. To know if any chemical is effective, good or bad, you have to know how much is involved. In biology and environmental engineering, chemical concentration is key to its impact. Let's do a quick calculation to see if there may have been enough chloramine in our fox to kill the baby rainbows. If City E, with an average treated sewage discharge of 20 million gallons per day, contains 2 milligrams per liter of chloramine, and summer low flows through the Central Fox Valley are 200 million gallons per day, assuming full dilution, what is the initial concentration of chloramine expected in the river? 0.2 milligrams per liter. 2.5 times the lethal concentration for baby rainbow mussel glow kids. That's right, Glute. Rainbows and floaters and spikes all gone in many parts of the river. There are many variables in this kind of research making the work challenging from the very start. Some species have more tolerance for certain chemicals than others. The toxic plume of chloramine from the wastewater plant may be small for some species, but for chloramine intolerant species, the toxic plume would be much larger. This is the kind of toxic chloramine plume that we may have had on our fox for years. Some years, with high river flows, the toxic plume disappears, not by magic, but by dilution, only to reappear and kill again when the river flows drop. We don't know how big these plumes can get or how long downstream they last, but we need to remember Spike's family tradition. Remember the young Glochidia, the nieces and nephews and grandkids of Spike all have to take their 3-week adolescent gill trip to maturity. Even a small plume can impact baby spikes and rainbows and giant floaters. Taking their school buses, the bass, the catfish, the sunfish to graduation, a ride inevitably carrying the glow kids into and out of the chloramine danger zone, not harming the fish, but killing the kids, and eventually their entire family in the Central Fox Valley. We know chloramine is more persistent in the water environment than either ammonia or chlorine. But even with a single data point and a lot of circumstantial evidence, there is reason to suspect chloramine has poisoned our mussels at a critical life stage for nearly 100 years. And where the greatest concentration of chloramine would have existed, the greatest mussel kill has occurred. This is the kill zone for Spike and his family. We've got a suspect, a known mussel killer, hiding under multiple aliases that was on the scene while mussel populations plummeted. Strong suspicion might not be good enough to indict, but not to convict. And with every good mystery, there's always one final twist at the end that comes out of nowhere. This is aqCSI, Fox River Valley. Chloramine poisoning of our Fox River stopped in 2010. After nearly a century, chloramine pollution finally stopped in the Fox River Valley with the last dechlorination retrofit of a wastewater treatment plant. Don't feel like you've been fooled by this final twist of the plot. As the title clearly stated up front, this is the case of the missing poison. If the chloramine hypothesis is correct, while there are still habitat issues with our dams and always the potential for disease, the mystery killer, chloramine, is gone, and our fox is ready to see the safe return of Spike and his family of native Fox River mussels. The Reverend Terry Gallagher of Aurora sent me this slide a couple of years ago, and it resonates today. A quote from Thomas King. "That is the new story, and now it is your story. Tell your friends. Make it a podcast. Put it on a t-shirt. But don't say you haven't heard it. You've heard it now." There's a surprising cost of having lost so many mussels from the Fox River Valley, and a continuing cost to protect those mussels that still remain. There are at least 4 paths you may follow after hearing this story. You can do nothing and let current practice stand. You can support research into chloramine LC50s, confirming and extending Goutreau's work to Spike, the big floater, and other native mussels. Bypass the research and immediately collaborate to repopulate native mussels on the chance the chloramine hypothesis is valid, or follow your own path of discovery into the world of science, engineering, and the humanities, hopefully a little enriched by this story. We are friends of the Fox River. We engage, we teach, we enjoy, and we thank you. But before we go, I want to give a shout out to a wonderful animated short produced by our friends in the Delaware River Basin. This is a beautifully told 5-minute tale about the lives of our freshwater mussels. Look it up and be inspired.